Good evening, everyone. If you are joining us live, thank you for joining us live for this special Athearn Extra. If you are catching us on YouTube, thank you for finding us. And if you like the content that you see, please do us a favor. Go ahead and like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video like this drops into the feed. Hey, let's get a few shout outs and I'll tell you what we're going to be talking about tonight. I see Mr. Ray Arnott has joined us as well as Dave Reynolds and Michael BN Green 1970. I think you're going to love this episode. I see Delta 9. I see Mr. Sid and Jackie and Steve, Lewis and Mark. Just to name a few, we've got a few guys joining us live on the live stream. Want to thank you once again for joining us. So we're going to be talking cabooses tonight, or packs, or vans, or buggies, or way cars, or whatever you like to call them. But we're going to be talking about that piece of equipment that used to trail on the end of a freight train right up until about the mid 1980s. And stick around. We're going to also be talking about the Genesis cabooses that we um, announced this past month, which, by the way, with it being Wednesday at this point of this live, you only got a few more days to place your pre orders on those way cars. So let's do another round of shout outs real quick. I see Andy, Dan, Lance, Mike, Delta 9, Daniel, Alco Steam, DG Model Works is in the house, Robin, Greg, Anthony, and John. So perfect timing, says John. He's working on decaling a locomotive at the moment. Perfect timing. I myself am guilty of doing some railroad projects while listening to some absolutely great podcasts out there. And so please enjoy the show while you get that locomotive decaled up. Now, like I was saying, we're going to be talking way cars, cabooses, and I was doing some thinking. In fact, I got an email the other day from a good friend and said, the Athearn wide vision caboose is going on 50 years. And I thought, wow, that doesn't seem right. I had to read the email again to make sure I wasn't getting my wires crossed. But yeah, he was right. 50 years. Now, when it comes to going back into the archives of HO scale on Christmases past, of model trains past that we may have received as gifts, when you want to know more about Athearn in the old days, there's no better man to turn to, and that is Tony Cook. Let me bring Tony on board.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well, Tony. How are you this evening?
I'm doing good. It's finally looking in, starting to feel like fall. I'm up here in Missouri right now.
And yeah, you were saying that it's been somewhat warm, but it sounds like we're going to get a cold streak here pretty soon.
As it always does, it seems like if they only could trick or treat like a week before Halloween, they'd have this wonderful, like 70-degree evening. But then when we finally get to Halloween, it's like sleet and 35. And I think my neighbor does a little weather station thing, and I shouted out to him today on the porch, and hey, we're gonna have to put away our shorts next week, all right? He goes, yeah, I'm afraid so. 20 degrees on Halloween. That's the low. So for
That's the
here,
low.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there is a silver lining to this. One of the things that I like to do, Tony, and I'm sure our viewers out there feel the same way. I do like a good, crisp, cool
Oh yeah.
autumn morning with a hot cup of coffee and maybe a good magazine to read. And you were telling me in an email, and I was reading in here too, that the Athearn Wide Vision caboose is 50 years old.
This is a big anniversary for both the prototype wide vision, which is international car, like the Genesis models that we'll talk about later in the show. But the wide vision on North American railroading is 70 years old. 1953 is when those first start in operation. And then the Athearn Blue Box model is 50 years old, that it came out
Wow.
50 years ago, 73 into 74. Yeah.
Now, Tony, before we go further, for anybody that's joining us either on the live or they're watching later on YouTube, should they not know who you are, give us a brief rundown of everything you do. You're a very busy man.
I am fairly busy. Yes, I for White River Productions, I do the monthly Model Railroad News, which is 100 pages of new product information and reviews. I also do Diesel Era for White River, which is the quarterly publication on prototype railroad stuff from the diesel era, so first generation diesels onto contemporary. And then I also do HO Collector, which is what you had in your hands there. The fourth quarter just came out, and we're transitioning it. It'll be a 116-page annual that'll be out next year for it. So I do those three, and I have some other projects here and there that I do. I've got my Model Train Resource website, which is modeltrainresource.com, where I post news, and I've got hobby history stuff there. So all sorts of train stuff.
Yeah, very busy, and it makes for some great reading on those cold days. I don't know about you, and I don't know about everyone else. For me, growing up in central New Hampshire in the 70s and 80s, October, November was kind of the time the trains came out of the attic, and we set up a piece of plywood and got the old brass sectional track out and started running trains. And winter and this type of hobby just seemed to go hand in hand. How
Mm-hmm.
about you?
Absolutely. I mean, it was always year round for me, but this time of year always seemed to be where a lot of stores that didn't always carry trains would suddenly have, in the toy sections or train sections as a kid. So this was always an exciting time of year for, new train stuff.
Oh, that's great. So, with that being said, it sounds like you've got some pictures that you'd like to share with us on first the prototype, right, Tony?
I did. I put together just kind of a group of different things that I thought would be of interest to kind of go through and look at because of the important dates for both the real ones and the models. I've asked a lot of people this since I stumbled across this fact doing some research this summer on the articles I was working on. The first railroad to operate International Cars wide vision caboose, and I believe it is also the first wide vision that no one else had done one yet, is Duluth, Mesabi, and Iron Range, which surprises me. I don't know. I guess I expected it to be just one of the big class 1 type roads, and then I think they had to have had a good salesperson, because look at this picture. You forget these ore cars with the height even loaded. How they said what you need is a caboose where you sit up higher so you can see over these tall ore cars. But anyhow, yeah, it did work, and they were the first road to get them. This is a shot from 1971, one of their SD9s there, and then one of the wide visions. And that is the first. C200 is the first International Car wide vision caboose, like 52, 53. They're 70 years old. Wow. And it's kind of an odd looking duck in a way. Look at the rivet pattern on the side, the diagonal roof, the large square cupola windows. But that's the first wide vision. And then this is a little bit later. I love that, I pulled this picture because we're both Ford guys.
Yeah.
And I assume that, wasn't that a heater there for the turnout, but you can see there's a cable or something. So I don't know what the truck is providing or what they're doing, trying to thaw something out there, but a nice big Ford F-150, what extended cab it looks like, with the Mesabi logo on the door. How cool is that? Yeah. And then again, that's a modernized, they got a couple of different runs on these cabooses, and this is a modern version of it. And again, International Car, they built for so many. This is, you've got the Burlington Northern, and then the CB&Q, the silver there are coming. I thought this was a neat shot. I think I included this in my HO Collector article on older wide vision cabooses. This BN SD7, that's and then the row of some of the roads that all made up Burlington Northern. This is a 1972 Harold Zier shot from Kevin U. Daly's collection up in Savannah, Illinois, of a row of cabooses. It's amazing all the detail, because now our models have that. Right. And when I look at these, I mean, look at the backup light on this Great Northern, the drop, down the little door with the logo, the air hose, coupler, cut lever. You didn't really think about it back in the day when it was just the blue box and some of those other models. And now I look at how detailed cabooses are, and we actually have models that match that today. So it's really awesome. There's a main central, and that's a lower cupola. If you see how, while it's still wide vision, see the Katie's a little bit taller.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of roads built their own too. But the International Car was one of the more popular ones. D&H 1989. This is one I love to see. This is, you guys have got the Burlington ones and stuff you've done, but boy, there were 2 runs of these. This is the 1966 group from Rio Grande that had the tall ladders and the roof walks, and then in 76 they got another group of modernized International car wide visions. And I think I've bombarded your R&D guys many times with pictures saying, boy, this would be a great caboose. And there's a SD45 in the background, and then there's your old blue box bay window back there, and then a cool Army thing being moved there. That's in Salt Lake City, July of 1969. That's a Jim Boyd shot. But how cool is that?
Wow.
And as I say, there, a lot of roads. In fact, I think you guys have in the Genesis line now, there's a Santa Fe prototype again. So as you look at them, they're not, just because it's a wide vision doesn't mean it's an international car. That design was built by a lot, and the Santa Fe built their own. This is kind of an interesting one. These were Santa Fe, so they would have looked like the old blue box steel offset cupola, and they were Santa Fe cabooses that Alton bought, Chicago and Alton, and then as GM&O took them over, they repainted, but they rebuilt into this, so they gave them this modern look, and you can kind of see where they've capped the window and the rivet pattern and such that, if you put the old steel cupola on there, that's what it looked like originally, but it was modernized into that. And then you still see some around here. This is Kanoki in Kansas City, and this is a picture that I took out rail fanning with my assistant editor, Shane Mason, not that long ago. And that sits over kind of in the work train stuff at the one end of Kanoki Yard, and that's one of the Illinois Central built a big wide vision caboose, and it got over to Chicago, Missouri Western, and then on to Gateway Western. But so there's a lot of different kinds. This is one. Now, this to me, it's neat. McLeod River must have bought a ton of blue box cabooses and then sawed them up, because this totally looks like something I would see on a table at a swap meet or like running on a layout. And it's like, oh, wow, what is that? It's like, well, I took the little roundhouse 30-foot flat car and made that the underframe. And then I sawed up the blue box caboose and made that. It's like, that is so cool.
That is cool.
And I would have to do more research. It's got a diagonal pattern roof. I assume they built them. I don't, or some maybe kit components that they put together. But that's such a cool road too. I think I have at least a couple of the old Athearn SD38s. I have that red, and then isn't there like a gray and brown, or there's another McLeod.
Kind of maroon and gray.
Wow. But boy, that's a really awesome, a neat prototype road, and that's a really fun caboose there.
That is neat.
And then I get back to another international, this Cotton Belt. I bring it up here to show because it was where the whole thing began. This is the April 1973, right inside the front cover of Railroad Model Craftsman magazine. That's the first ad for the wide vision caboose, and they showed the prototype picture of a Cotton Belt because the model wasn't quite ready. In fact, the U-boats apparently weren't ready yet either. There's the release of the U30 and U33s coming out, and flywheels were brand new at the time. I always forget that. I always think the flywheel was always around, but the flywheel hits for the Athearn Drive in the early 70s. So this is April of 73, brings us the first of the cabooses. And this is one, I've shared this before with some Athearn collectors and always had some surprise, like, wow, they never made that, did they? And it's like, no, they didn't. The rest, everything listed there was produced, and those are the first blue box kits that came out in early 74. And this was in the group, but didn't get not produced, which makes for a fun collector type thing. This is from my HO collector look at the cabooses. This is the one blue one is from that. It was a special release with, I think, the SW 1500 switcher.
Yes, it was.
Came in kind of that long box that this is a neat Athearn one, and then that patched one, I think I picked that up that day you and I were at Midwest Model Railroad this spring for a live show that I saw. That's right. That patched one is from that new recent Roundhouse release, and that's in the December Model Railroad News, which is just around the corner. That I sent that to the printer a bit ago, and this should be landing in mailboxes and at hobby shelves and at like Barnes and Noble, those places soon. And boy, I'd forgotten this. This is the lead news piece, is your bathtub gons.
That's right. Brand new for N-Scale. So N-Scale guys, take note.
Yeah, there you go. Got the N scale, and then the extended version comes to HO, and I think the HO gets some updates too. But that's December's
Oh,
Model Row news, and you had the HO Collector fourth quarter is out with that look at wide vision cabooses, and then I just received this from Auto today. This December's Collector Consist. I round up all of the early 1970s. It's odd that well, I guess not odd because it seems to happen in the hobby, but we went from having no wide vision cabooses for what, 20 years, from
something like
1953
that.
to 73. You couldn't find a plastic ready to run, and then by 1975 there's like 5 or 6 that,
Hmm.
and we do that. We go from not having a good model to, well, now there's 4 that you can pick from, and that's the Tyco model, which in a way favors that Masabi a bit, the roof pattern, and it's got the rivet sides. But anyhow, yeah, that's a neat article. And then in Diesel Era, which again, this one is going to press in the next couple weeks. It should be out around the beginning of November. I'll be covering Rio Grande's SW1000s, rebuilds by Rock Island's Jeep 40s for Silvis, and then KDF units. And then I also have got a couple pages devoted
Nice.
to those Masabi cabooses in there as well. And then I guess the big caboose news is what you got coming. We talked about that Roundhouse group that's out, but these are closing in on the deadline for pre-orders, are the new group of Genesis Wide Visions. And I pulled a handful of pictures that are in the neighborhood of the models you have coming. Oh, this is an awesome shot. This is June of 67. And I think it's Galesburg,
I was gonna
but
say it kind of looks like Galesburg.
I wouldn't bet my life on it. Maybe somebody would know, but that looked like Galesburg to me. And there's a Jeep there with an old wooden caboose,
Hmm.
that streamlined cupola. I think that's an NE11 that was built in Lincoln, Nebraska by Burlington Shops, and then
Right.
an International Wide Vision caboose. I really like that picture. It looks so much like a model.
It
I guess
does.
it's the down on thing, but that's a neat shot. With the I love the long red stripe. I think that's such a nice scheme, and I think you've got both
We
in this
do. Yeah.
this review. The solid, there's a solid silver with the red stripe, and then if you notice ahead of it there, it looks like Athearn center flows in
Oh yeah.
Burlington paint. Yeah,
Neat. Yeah, you know I have a soft spot for Burlington, so
it's a great road. I
yeah,
mean
it was
the
really neat.
yeah, really awesome. That's early 1981. A whole string of
Mm.
VN wide visions. Then I thought this is kind of like, this is the last one I got. This is March of '88. And there's it's SD9 with, that's I think a rebuilt switcher, because I don't think they got those as a calf, because looking at the hood I think that's more like an
Right.
SW1000, and if I remember right, Rio Grande and CB&Q bought the 1000s. I can't remember if that was wrecked or what, but it's turned into like that neat, and that's a great shot looking down to see what that looks like when they remove the cab, and then a top on view of one of the Burlington cabooses. And the guy did a great job. Look at the load there in that railgun gondola, and he's even put the wires on his center
Nice.
beam car. Dang. And
It looks
patched up,
brand new.
yeah, patched up that beer car there, and the track work is good. This guy, there's an MMR at work there. I'm impressed.
Exactly.
That's very cool. But yeah, so,
Wow. That's neat. You know,
but
it's
yeah,
cabooses in general. Whatever you want to call them, but for most folks, they're a caboose. Um, used to be a rather personalized piece of equipment. Going back to the 1800s, early 1900s, most railroads built their own. Now, my road, the Boston and Maine, they built cabooses in Laconia. There was actually a shop in Laconia, New Hampshire, that built wooden cabooses. And of course, going back to the CB&Q, they built some of their own cabooses. And back in the old days, of course, they were a wooden structured vehicle, if you will. And but they didn't have that wide vision caboose like we were talking about. They didn't have the wide vision cupola, and it came about. And you said 1950s. That's when we started seeing a change in railroading. We saw, the 40 foots were slowly getting replaced by 50 footers, and let's see, was it Norfolk Western, or I want to say it was Norfolk Western that was one of the first ones to come out with an auto parts boxcar that was a 60-foot length. and early
Yes.
60s, I think it was.
Yeah, Southern was big with like the big John Hoppers and things
That's
of
right. Yeah,
suddenly
another
that
one.
that push for specialized cars, so not everything
Hmm.
had to go in a 40-foot boxcar anymore, and
Right.
going to that 100-ton weight, from what had been like 50-ton as a standard. That all
Exactly. Yeah,
blows
and
up in the late 50s.
as these cars got longer and bigger and wider and special loads like that, the older cabooses they wouldn't they couldn't cut it as much. And of course, crews back then were five-man crews, and having more room, the caboose was really an office. It was a mobile
Mhm.
office. And so these wide vision cabooses came back basically as a demand for safety because of the um, physical dimensions of the freight cars that were operating at the time. And at that point, like you were saying, International Car Company, they kind of came in and they're like, hey, we can make these cabooses just like, anything else. And so they kind of had from a distance, they look generic, but they're
Mm,
really not. When you start
no.
really looking at the cabooses, you can see the railroads would order them based on their particular needs. But this is like you were saying, for about 20 years in the modeling community, we didn't have those. And then in the 70s, it just blew up.
Yeah.
Everybody was making them. And so it's a really interesting way. And of course, for me, it's a relatively modern caboose because we didn't have wide visions on the Boston and
Mm,
Maine. Didn't see those until I came out west and saw them on the early BNSF being used as shoving platforms and things of that nature. But it's really cool to see the evolution of these cabooses and these models for that matter too. You
mhm.
talk about the blue box models. How many of those wide vision blue box models do you think got sold over the years?
I know my first was that Orange, Illinois Central. I remember building it when it first came out, and over the years, I think I say in one of the articles that buying cabooses is a close second for me to locomotives, as
Hmm.
far as, wow, that's really cool, and maybe not even something I would normally collect or model, but I gotta have that. And so cabooses tend to be a soft spot of, oh, that's really cool. I need to have one of those.
I would have to say my first wide vision caboose was actually a gift when I was younger, and it was the Blue Box CNO
Mm.
Enchantment Blue.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
believe it
yeah.
had yellow ends,
Hmm.
wide vision caboose, and I probably still have it somewhere. But that was probably my first one.
It's amazing how much that's changed. I think there's that at times you get that misconception looking at the some of the current things are like in the Athearn Roundhouse line and others, thinking, well, it's just an assembled version of what was that kit. And boy, they're not. And that's
Right.
that's another one I think in one of the articles I point out, like the ends have been retooled. It never had glass originally, and it's got, the clear window material now. So yeah, it kind of surprises you because again, they were always kind of there, whether it was kit or to ready to roll to roundhouse, that they just seem like they're always around. And
Hmm.
yet you start looking at them. Well, even some of the early ready to roll are different from what the roundhouse is. Like they didn't have glass 20, 25 years ago when they first came out, and that window material has been added now. And well, like that Burlington Northern is basically a shoving platform that I reviewed in Model Railroad News with all the capped windows. That kind of came along later. So lots of changes to the models, just as the prototypes had too.
Yeah, most definitely. I go back to my first. Actually, it was my first kit bash. Was a blue box wide vision caboose, and it was because of an article that was in Model Railroad Craftsman. And this was still in an era in the early 80s when cabooses were still being used. But the FRA, if you remember this, Tony, the FRA had mandated, I believe it was Lexan, because there were actually
With
a
the
lot of
glass. Yeah.
rocks and guns and things of that nature that were causing damage to the caboose and subsequently harming the crews. And so around 81, 82, if memory serves correctly, FRA said, hey, you're going to have some type of projectile proof window coverings on your cabooses. And of course, it wasn't cost effective to get all of those windows updated. So a lot of cabooses were simply plated over, kind of like
Mhm.
that example you showed earlier. And that was my first kit bash. I remember very patiently cutting out small pieces of evergreen styrene and covering up those windows and trying to make it look as good as the article. So it's funny how, like you said, how we've gone from the blue box, which was a rather simple model, but it was definitely a product of its era. And now we have even the roundhouse ones that you showed earlier. The printing is far superior.
Oh yeah.
You know, like you said, the windows are there. That was something that we didn't have in the past. Um, and now we have Genesis ones, and the Genesis ones just blow my mind.
Oh, those are beautiful, and those come with the sound cars, one of the options. So it's got like the
Yeah.
backup, the little like toot whistle and things that they would have, and I mean, just unbelievable. The lighting, yeah.
In fact, I've got a little bit of information here
Ah,
to show. There's the one from the previous release. Now these are still in stores, and you know something else I didn't mention that was a change for cabooses was pool cabooses. That P that you see on there
mm,
for pool service. Remember how earlier the caboose was basically a part of the crew, and that would stay with the crew. So if a Burlington route locomotive left, say, um, Galesburg and was on its way to somewhere in Nebraska and it had to stop, they would actually physically change out the cabooses. And this was kind of the end of that. When they started going to the pool cabooses, they didn't have to do that. They could change the crews. They didn't have to change out the caboose. And of course, that made things, you know, got from point A to point B a little bit quicker. It was a little bit easier on all the way around.
I didn't realize there were wipers. I saw that on a picture. I think that cotton belt, as I was going
Mm-hmm.
through pictures today for our show, I noticed the cotton belt had the wipers on the forward and I assume back, or you know, both of the one sides of the cupola. And I see they're on that model too. And I'm gonna have
They
to
are.
pull mine off the shelf and look at that again. I guess I didn't notice that. Wow, cool.
Yeah, and like you were saying, these are available with or without sound. They all come with lights, but they come with or without sound. And the sound. If somebody actually asked me at a show, they said, "What do you need sound in a caboose for?" And I said, "Well, if you've got a small switching layout, I actually had this layout with me at the RPM. I said, if you have something very small like this, and if you're using the caboose properly, you can actually set this up so that when you come to a grade crossing, you can hit the air horn. The caboose had an air horn.
Hmm.
It's got the generator sound. It's you can even um, allow it to have the flat spot on the wheel if you really want to go that route. It's got the squealing of the flanges on the rails, just some little minor details, and it just kind of makes somebody with a small layout that's doing prototype operations a little bit more in depth, I think.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's a nice. They're a nice feature for like you've done that with what the one mechanical reefers come with
Yeah.
sound that had to do the generators and things. And then this again, as you think, what do you need sound in a piece of rolling stock for? But then when you think about it, it's like there are a lot of things they did, and it really adds to the realism of them.
Yeah, it's a different time of railroading, and it was a an interesting time because there was so much more that had to be done. Now, for a modeler, that's good. For the railroads, that's a money pit. You know, the care and maintenance of these cabooses, the crews that would man them, and of course maintenance and things of that nature. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, for a modeler, we don't see these as much on trains. They've been replaced with a little orange or yellow box, but for its day, as far as a modeler, it really does add another dimension to operations.
And this previous run is still around. You say the Genesis? There's still stock on those.
There is if you can see behind me, I've got one of the Burlington Northern cabooses behind my CB&Q. Well, I should say Burlington Northern Jeep 7 back there. That one is still available and at your Athearn dealer, and there's a few of the Burlington route way cars as well. Some of the way cars are relettered for Burlington Northern, like the example that we've got on the screen here. But the funny thing about the Burlington way cars is, did you know that a lot of these, in some cases, stayed in this original paint scheme until as late as March of 1982?
Wow. No, I did not. I remember a lot of patch stuff early, but boy, it seems like Cascade Green flowed well, and
Hmm.
most of it was gone by the mid 70s. So, wow, early 80s, huh?
Yeah, there's a picture of actually one that we're offering in this run in Galesburg, Illinois, and I believe it's March of 1982. And it's one of those things where you think about that merger that happened in 1970, and suddenly you inherit all these different railroads are coming together, and you have a new corporate paint scheme. And obviously they're going to do the locomotives and such first. In fact, I think I have read somewhere in one of my books that the Burlington Northern actually got most of its motive equipment painted within a 10-year span into the corporate Cascade Green, but that didn't fall into place for freight cars and way cars in this case. So while a majority of these were painted pretty quickly in the 70s, there was still one or two in their original paint.
Wow.
So I will show you what we are offering for this run, and this is all Burlington Northern and CB&Q, and the CB&Q called their cabooses way cars. And this first one that we've got here, these two here are part of the second order from International Car. There was about 50 of these that they ordered in September of 1967, and these are what they would call an NE13A class. This is the group of cabooses that enabled the CB&Q to institute the system-wide caboose pool that I was talking about earlier.
Oh.
And the way these cars are, the artwork that you see here, you can run these on your layout from the late 1960s all the way into the early 1970s. So if you're modeling the last days of the CB&Q, or if you're modeling the early days of the BN, you can actually add these to your fleet. Not any problems there, because like I said, these will last into the 1970s. And some of the features of this particular way car, again, this is an NE13A class caboose. So it does have a trainline air whistle, and that can be operated if you go for the DCC version. It also has that firecracker antenna that you can probably see. And yeah, this is not the flashier of the paint schemes that CB&Q had. They've had the other version with the red stripe that you had commented earlier on. But still kind of neat. You got the red on the ends there. That top one, then again, that's part of the second order that was from 1967. But the next one in Cascade Green, that's kind of an interesting caboose. This is the only one in this run that we're offering in this particular paint scheme. But it was painted rather quickly. If I remember right, December of 1970, this actually got painted in Cascade Green and yellow. And,
I thought it was a nice scheme, very striking with the yellow ends.
Yeah.
And the kind of aluminum. I assume the roof was left probably the way it was when it was CB&Q, that it was just that's a galvanized or treated metal. But
there were some, and it was kind of interesting. John was talking to me while he was doing a lot of the research on these, and yeah, you would think that a lot of them had just been left that that bare galvanized silver, but he did find some cases where they actually painted the roofs Cascade Green as well.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Which is really interesting. Yeah. I've got a book here by Robert C. Del Grosso. He used to do a lot of annuals on both BN and BNSF, and he did a wonderful book on Burlington Northern cabooses from 1970 to 95. And of all the great pictures in there, I didn't see that. I'll have to go through that again now that John's told me about it. But it just goes to show there's a prototype for everything, and when you're doing this kind of modeling, you really got to try to get as many pictures of the subject material as possible.
Absolutely. What's the lighting? Remind me on that again. They have interior lighting, and does the end red light blink? Is that right?
So the end light on the CB&Q ones are going to be solid. Some of them will have the lantern lights, but not all of them. And of course, you do have interior lighting. Now, one of the things that we did get for feedback on the previous runs was we had some folks complain they didn't feel that the interior lighting or any of the class lights was bright enough. And of course, those older ones, including the ones that are out there right now, you can't adjust those. They just come set to a illumination right from the factory. These new ones that we're doing in this run, that can actually be adjusted now.
Oh, neat.
So that's a nice feature that we're adding to these cabooses. And lighting can be kind of subjective, I think, Tony. We've talked about this with number boards. We've talked about this with truck lights on the locomotives. What I might consider to be bright enough, you may not for whatever reason, or just maybe the way your layout is or where your layout is situated. You want it a little bit brighter so you can enjoy those effects. This will now allow you to fine tune it to your taste.
That is a nice feature. That's probably one of the only things I heard that was not a real big positive, that these were really well received. But yeah, there were some upset on the lighting. So nice that that's been modified for this next run.
So this green one, I was starting to give a little bit of background on this. This was from a CB&Q order in April of 1964. This was their first order of NE13s. And what's really interesting about this one here is it is a former BN, like I was saying, but it's one of the earlier ones to get repainted. I think we're talking March 1970 is when Burlington Northern came into being. And then just a few short months later, in December of 1970, this caboose was painted in this. And I agree, Tony. It's a very striking paint scheme. I always like this paint scheme. As much as I love CB&Q, I still find the Cascade Green to be really nice. And then here's the one that you like.
I really like that, yeah, with the long red band. And it looks like you've got patch, or both those are BN patched, aren't they?
Both are both BN, yes. These guys here, believe it or not, these guys lasted quite a while. You remember I was telling you that some of these lasted up until about 82 or so. They were renumbered relatively quickly. They were renumbered within about 2 years after the merger. But they remained in this CB&Q color paint scheme for many, many years. So again, if you're modeling the early BN and I mean, really, if you think about it, modeling early Burlington Northern would be really cool. Just think of all of the colors.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, both of us have seen the Jim Boyd pictures of Galesburg in the early 70s. And it's just all kinds of different paint schemes in the yard. Well, this is something you can definitely add to that era. So if you're modeling 1970s into the late 1970s, you can absolutely justify these in your fleet. We're going to offer 3 different road numbers for these two. I've got just 2 pictures of this one here. And the Fort Worth and Denver. Kind of a neat little line. Kind of neat how, that was kind of a subsidiary of the CB&Q, kind of like the CNS.
Yeah. And
they were allowed to pretty much, function as a railroad, but they had the identity of the parent company. So it goes, no shock there that these originally were in CB&Q colors. They were in a variation of it. When Burlington Northern came to be, they kept the Fort Worth and Denver and the Colorado and Southern right up until, I think it was about 1980, just before the Frisco purchase.
I think it is. Yeah. I think as Frisco comes in, they wipe out or consolidate. Yeah. CNS and Fort Worth and Denver were folded in at about that time. But yeah, it is interesting that they make it through the Burlington Northern merger, that they remain kind of that quasi, independent subsidiary all the way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the Fort Worth and Denver, they purchased 12 of these International Car Company extended vision cabooses. They were numbered 151 to 162, and they ordered them in November of 1967. And yeah, like I was saying, when they were originally delivered, they were in CB&Q paint. They were in a version of the CB&Q aluminum in red and in black. But then, by the, I'd say about the mid 70s or so, these got painted in the Cascade Green. But they kept the Fort Worth and Denver markings, the reporting marks, and they kept their numbers too. And again, that goes up until about the 1980s, early 1980s. And so we're going to offer 3 road numbers for these guys. And again, I can't believe we're saying this, Tony, but October, this Friday, the 27th, is the last day to pre-order these Genesis cabooses that we're talking about right now, and anything else that we've talked about October. It doesn't seem like we're already looking into November.
It is. No, I had somebody say that to me on the phone this week. Like, well, that's the first part of November. I'm like, yeah, that's not till November. I don't need to worry about that right now. It's like, that's next week. Like, okay. Well, wait a minute. What were you asking me? Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's
goes
just
quicker and
amazing
quicker. Yeah.
time goes. It doesn't seem like it. So there you have it. I mean, that's what we're offering now, and it's a good time if you really like way cars, cabooses. This is a good time to pick these up because, like I said, the ones like the one behind me on the layout, those are out there. You had mentioned Midwest Hobby. I know they've got a good selection of those, and of course, there's some other ones um, out there that you can choose from. So you can purchase one now for your layout. You can pre-order one of these for your layout, and then they'll be out probably about a year from now. And then sounds like the roundhouse ones that you and I both have. It sounds like there's some of those out there in the marketplace right now.
I think there's still a few of those because I think I circled back when I did that review of that Burlington, kind of the shoving platform one in that paint. I went looking to think, did I miss anything out of that group? Or when I do a review, I usually pull your PDFs for when it was announced so I can, look and reference the other numbers. And I think maybe Rock Island, there were a couple of different road names that were like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should look back and try to get a couple of those. But I think they're still around here and there at some places.
Yeah, and for folks that like cabooses, I'm seeing some comments. Yeah, it's a good time to be a caboose modeler. We talked about the CA11. We announced that at the National Train Show, and we're going to doing it in Genesis, not only in HO, but we're doing it in N scale.
Wow.
So I know Shane will probably be pretty happy about those because the N scale modeler that he is,
and a UP guy. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff coming out for us that like cabooses. Remember sometimes I jokingly refer to it as the bad old days. Remember when we just had to go and find a generic caboose and just kind of make it work for our railroad?
It was, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, caboose models today, there's really almost no excuse for why are you running that painted as Burlington Northern when there really are cabooses that are what that should be. So yeah, it's fantastic. While I have you tonight, Bob, I know you said we were going to wrap up quick. I wanted to ask a couple of questions that I've had emails on. The in-scale Genesis tank car is, I've had people asking how soon before it shows up, and an update on the Roundhouse F7A new tooling.
Sure. So we'll start with the 13K acid tank cars at N scale. I am also impatiently waiting for those. We're hoping for an ETA of right now, and this can change. Keep in mind that there's a lot of elasticity right now, so we're watching those dates. But right now, we're looking about late spring, early summer. So, maybe the May, June area. That could change. That could come sooner. We have certainly at Athearn gotten a lot of product in the DC recently. The SD40 T-2s have shipped. The GP9s have shipped. So production's starting to catch up. So maybe we'll see those as early as spring. The Roundhouse F units are coming along rather nicely. I'm really looking forward to these. If you haven't out there and seen those, basically we took the old Athearn Blue Box F unit and we brought it up to 21st century standards. We still tried to make it economical, but we also made a great base for somebody that does like to custom paint and detail. We're offering them both with a single and dual headlights and undecorated, and those should be here. I want to say, Tony, it looks like we're looking about early first quarter of 2024. So I don't think we got to wait too much longer.
Very cool. Very cool. And I've had lots of positives. In fact, I've been teased a couple of times on the new tunnel motors because I think there's an SP Black Widow. I think someone asked me how many of those did I buy. So it's like, yeah, that is kind of up my alley. But they do look great. The pictures of them look awesome. So eager to see those. Yeah.
They definitely do. It's one of those things with the legendary liveries. We've talked about this in the past. It's a very there is no gray area with those. You either love them or you hate them.
Hate
And
them. Yeah.
I always tell folks, it's like, well, it's one of those things where we produce them because there are fans out there. And I think it was just recently you reviewed the legendary livery ICG and IC
Oh yeah.
SC70s.
Yeah.
And I was honestly I was never really a fan of the Death Star. I really like the Illinois Central Gulf paint scheme better. And man, that 70 does look so much better in the orange and white.
It really does look. I had someone wrote me a letter, an actual physical letter came to me, which yes, I do get those handwritten, and said how neat they thought those looked. And that one picture, I think, of a Jeep 38, a GM&O Jeep 38 that had just been painted ICG. That was a shot of my dad's. That they said that was really awesome to see this clean new ICG unit, and then the Athearn 70s. That they did a great job recreating or keeping the look of that early 70s paint on what would be a newer prototype. So I think it was enjoyed. Very neat piece.
Well, we're going to start wrapping this up. Tony, you want to take a few questions and then we'll get back to our modeling endeavors.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you got a question for myself or Tony, now's the time to ask. We're just going to take a few questions because we went a little bit longer than we originally intended. But if you got some questions for us, go ahead and put them out there. I'm watching now. I'm thinking I saw one just earlier, and I'm going to see if I can find it. JD Boyd has a question for you, Tony. He says, Tony, please ask for an update on the RX 500. I want Athearn to take my money on that one.
That I had a lot of, in fact, I think it was John Stackpole when he sent me some of the information on that. He said, this is really awesome. But he said, I will track you down if you say it's the new Genesis little Hustler switch engine. So I have not said that, although I've had a lot of people say that, wow, that's really cool. I'm excited on that one. I think that's going to be a very neat little project. I was trying to think the other I think it's a Genesis car that someone asked me, that Texarkana 60-foot box car that was announced sometime back.
Back in March.
Yeah, I think there were prototype pictures at the time, but I've been asked on that is there any updates or because I don't ever remember seeing line drawings or anything for just kind of where was that project at. But
yeah, good question. We are currently working on that. We don't have the line art done yet. We hope to get caught up with some of those projects. But the actual model itself, probably going to take a little bit longer than what we would like. I'm going to say right now, a rough estimate is late summer of next year. We've had, and as you know, a lot of manufacturers have had this issue lately. The first thing that slowed us down, of course, was a chip shortage. And people say, well, that shouldn't affect the boxcar or caboose. Well, actually it does, because our factory, once they gear up for a specific model, everything falls out behind it. So let's say they've got everything geared up for the F units we talked about earlier. We can't run those box cars until the F units are done. And it's kind of, a cog system, if you will. So it does affect, we've got a lot of locomotives that we've announced over the last 2 years that we're trying to get caught up now that we don't have the chip shortage. And as a result, I'm impatient myself. I'm still waiting for my GP15s. And
I forgot about those.
Yeah,
I've got Rio Grande and SPs ordered in that bunch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that Rock
wow.
Island Rail.
Oh yeah.
So one of the things about the manufacturing process is once the machinery is set up for specific projects, they run that specific project until it's done, and then they have to pretty much like a factory, a car assembly plant. They have to set up the machinery for the next project. It's just a smaller scale. So we're starting to get caught up. We're starting to see stuff come in. So I'd like to say, we might see something by late summer of next year, and hopefully we can get some line art to you, Tony, and to our our crowd on social media and
And
give you
that on
some
the
updates.
back to that RX 500, that little switcher, that is it Respondec? I forget what the name of the company is that makes that.
Oh, Republic?
Republic.
Hmm.
That's not officially announced yet, right? Was it at? It was at the Dallas National Show mentioned, but in
Right.
like monthly announcements, because I think I've been asked that, and I start going back looking like, well, now I can't find it, and it's like, oh yeah, I don't
Hmm.
think it has been
It
officially
hasn't been
announced
announced.
yet.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was, I guess what you could call as a soft announcement.
yeah.
We wanted to come out with something big for the National Train Show. That's the that's the Super Bowl of model railroading, and so we'll be announcing that. I know John has been hard at work on this. He's shown me some things that I wish I could share, but I can't yet. I'm sworn to secrecy. Um, John is a very talented engineer, and I'm really impressed with what he's doing on this project. I think we're all going to be really happy when we start seeing some more information leak out. We'll probably announce it. It's definitely going to be in 2024, probably early to mid 2024. We should see an announcement on that. As far as the CA11s, because I know that's going to come up next, I believe we've got that slotted for early 2024 for the announcement. Because I've been sending you ads on that CA11 for a couple of
Yeah.
months now. We've been hitting it hard.
And every time I see that ad as I'm laying it into Model Row News, I'm like, I still don't think they've announced that yet. And if they're running that, you just saw our new release. It's there at the end of that. It's a prototype shot of a train. And then I think,
Yep.
I don't think that's announced yet. Yeah.
No,
What
not
show have you
yet.
got coming up? Are you going to Oklahoma City, or you got any train shows before? Amherst is going to be here before we know it
Amherst,
somehow. Yeah.
the Big E, yeah. We'll be going to that next. That's the last weekend in January, and that's my stomping grounds. John Sacradotti, I should be hearing from him soon. If you're out there, John, I'm waiting for your email. Yeah, we're going to be there, and John is going to join us again this year. That was great to have him on board of the booth, and of course, Mark will be there. Yeah, that's our next show. How about you? Are
Okay.
you scheduled to do any shows?
I'm trying to think now. I had a couple things that I was looking at, but no, yeah, I nothing officially right now. No, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Probably, I'm a little biased, but probably the Amherst show is one of my favorites. That's probably the one of my go-to shows. And of course, we'll go to Rocky Mountain again next year. Rocky Mountain in Denver, Colorado. That's a great show. And you never know what we're going to do. Last year, you saw Mark and I on the road. We got to meet up at
Oh yeah,
the
you guys were,
Midwest
yeah.
and
Then we
Spring
met
Creek.
up
So that
again
was
at
fun.
Spring Creek. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you never know what I'll dream up. I did see another question here. BN Green 1970 says, speaking of due dates, are the SW 1500s still expected this year? Yes. Yes, they are. In fact, keep your eyes on the layout in the next few weeks. You're probably going to see one up there.
And
Are the GP?
that
Go
gets some
ahead. Sorry.
update. That gets updates too, doesn't it? Hasn't it got like
Oh,
new
it gets
lighting,
updated.
and there's a lot
Yeah,
of new things to
sound.
it. Yeah.
For the first time, it's got
Oh, that's
sound.
right. Yeah, it's sound. Okay, yeah.
And I've already been playing with one, and the sound is phenomenal. And lighting features, yeah, you're right. There's lighting features that this has not had in the past. You have your truck lights, your ground lights. Depending on the prototype locomotive you have, there are additional lighting features like the rotating beacon. We did the Burlington Northern run, so they're going to have a rotating beacon. So there'll be lighting effects. And the other thing too that's really nice is there was a little bit of work done to the drivetrain. I know John did some work on the drivetrain and the motor. And so these things run really nice and smooth. So if you've got a small switching layout and you're waiting for a switcher, wait another few weeks before purchasing something. These guys are going to be here before you know it.
I know he was doing a lot to it. I pulled the SW 1000 and 1500 samples out when I was working on that Rio Grande article that's in the next diesel era. And John and I were going back and forth on, I was asking him questions. And it's like, what is it you think it needs to be fixed on this that I'm not? Well, look at this again on the top. This is what we fixed. I'm like, oh, okay, I see it now. But yeah, it's amazing. There was a lot of work done on that enhancement or update.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, we're seeing and I'm sure you guys in the magazine world are seeing it too, because I've seen some of the great articles in RMC lately. We're seeing a lot more folks doing shelf style
Mhm.
layouts or small switching layouts, and of course these little guys, they shine on that. So it was just
Yeah.
time to update that for, the demanding modeler that wants that kind of performance in a small locomotive. And I don't think they're going to be disappointed. I'm really looking forward to seeing guys get their hands on those. I'm seeing some questions too about the P42s. I'm sure, Tony, you're probably wondering too about the Amtrak P42s. We have had some delays. Now, one of the things I want to mention is we have a very close relationship with Amtrak. And so we go back and forth with Amtrak, and they have to be checked off by Amtrak before we can sell them. And that's a good thing, because that means you're getting an authentic model. Now, Janik and I have teased you with some pictures on social media of the P42s. We're getting closer. We're going to try to get those in. We're really trying to get those in before the end of 2024. I'm sorry, 2023. We can't promise it, but that's what we're really trying to do. So keep an eye on social media. I'm kind of using social media right now as a place to let you know when items that you pre-ordered will be available. And Sid, yes, I see your tunnel motors. Sid is my tunnel motor aficionado. He's always asking about tunnel motors. Sid, Ohio Central, you might want to check your shop. I believe those have shipped, because I believe, Tony, I think I tried to get you one for review, and I think those are gone from our DC already. So super popular.
Those are amazing how they went to so many different places. You think of the tunnel motors initially as SP Rio Grande, and they're as that Ohio Central. It's like, oh, I remember those. I think they were gray and red or maroon, and yeah, that those again all over the place and still around. Some of them. I just had Greg Stout sent me a picture. It was an SD45 T-2 is guarding a grain elevator somewhere like in North or South Dakota that he took a picture of, and it's painted like silver and blue. I've got it in the next diesel era, but neat to see they're still going strong.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's kind of weird, because usually when you think tunnel motors, like you said, I always have a scene in my head of, Denver, Rio Grande, mountains, tunnels, all that. And then Ohio Central just doesn't seem like somebody
Mhm.
would have a tunnel motor, does it? But sometimes the
Yeah.
truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, it's still, it's a good, reliable SD40-2, basically. So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, it
all in
really
all,
was.
yeah.
I got a few questions I'm seeing in there. I've piqued the interest of a few of our fans. They want to know more about the GP15. So I believe it was June of 21, we announced that we had updated the tooling for the GP15s. And the GP15s, of course, that was the 1970s budget EMD during the fuel crisis of the 1970s. EMD's idea was, a lot of railroads like the Illinois Central were rebuilding Jeep 7s and Jeep 9s, turning them into Paducahs. Rather than do that, EMD thought, well, what if we just offered them a modern alternative to a rebuilt first generation Jeep? And the GP15 was born of that. It was kind of oh, I don't know. I guess I would go as far to say, no offense to EMD fans, the Pinto of the Jeeps. Because really, the Pinto wasn't really a bad car. It did what it did. A lot of people jokingly say it exploded, but that was a little bit of some media sensationalism for the time. Really, the GP15 was a very successful little locomotive. They didn't make very many of them, but a lot of railroads like the Mopac and Conrail really adopted deep into the GP15s. And so we've had that in our Genesis class for a number of years. And a lot of folks are asking for more lighting features. So one of the things that was done is this new run will have, uh, illuminated number boards, something that we didn't have in the past. The truck lights. There's some other fine details that we did, and we announced those, like I said, in 2021. And yes, those are HO scale, and we're trying to get those in spring of 2024.
That should be a very neat run. The legendary liveries in that bunch. I can't remember if it was the SP or the Rio Grande, but I had either you or somebody at Athearn said one of those two road names is outsold. The pre-orders are bigger than anything you sold in G15s prior. It's like, wow. But they
Yeah,
are very cool.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, the funny thing is, and it was the legendary liveries, of course, that outsold everything else. And the one that was not a legendary livery, we actually got blamed on social media that was a legendary livery when it really is a prototype. Yes, yes, there is a Rock Island Rail GP15,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
but a lot of people thought we were trying to do a legendary livery on them. I'm like, no, that's a real locomotive. It really exists. We worked with the Rock Island Rail to produce that locomotive. But you were right. The legendary liveries of the GP15, to my surprise, just out pre-sold everything else. It was incredible.
It's a great meal. You mentioned the switchers for shelf layouts. Those 15s, I think, are great for smaller layout too, because it's like a regular road unit Jeep, but it's also small enough that it's, because it's like an old Jeep 7.9 basically, where the jobs it took over. So it's a great shelf
Absolutely.
for switching layout locomotive.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, we've talked about cabooses and Athearn for about an hour, and I want to thank everybody out there for joining us. Any closing comments for us, Tony?
I'm looking forward to seeing the new run. I got there's some of the Athearn Roundhouse ones I got to go back. I think there's a couple of road names I still got to pick off, but boy, it's great stuff. And again, it was a surprise to me on learning that the prototypes go back 70 years, and then the
Mhm.
Athearn model is 50 years, and all the others that all hit at that same time too. So again, check out December's Railroad Model Craftsman, December Model Railroad News, fourth quarter HO Collector, fourth quarter Diesel Era. I've got wide vision stuff in all four of those publications, and you can find out more. You can go to shop.whiteriverproductions.com to see more about that.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't have that in your mailbox inbox, I don't mean digital, contact them today. Great publication, lots of great reading. Great publication company. And Tony, we thank you for your support because Tony actually sends us a lot of information on our products based on the prototype. So I thank you for that. Everybody that's joined us here tonight, I appreciate you stopping by and sharing your evening with Tony and I. And until next time, everyone out there, be happy, be healthy, be safe, do some good modeling, and above all, high greens.
High
Good night,
greens.
everyone.